Okay, so in this video we're going to look at a B-flat blues with full chord voicings, not just your thirds and sevens, and along the way I'll be peppering in a little bit of advice on how to add a little bit more rhythmic variety and rhythmic spice to your jazz piano playing. So far, for the most part, we've mostly just been doing half notes and whole notes, which there's nothing terrible about that, but eventually we want to introduce a little bit more rhythm. So as a general rule, less is more. We want to have a nice balance of both upbeats and downbeats, but we would prefer syncopation. So we would prefer hitting chords on upbeats rather than downbeats if we have a choice. But like everything, too much of the same thing gets boring after a while, so we want to mix it up. But first let's look at the voicings, and then I'll show you some examples of some rhythms later on. So we're going to look at inversion 1 first, where we're going to start with the third in our thumb on the 1 chord. So just a very quick review. In jazz, a blues, we're going to be doing in the key of B flat. In jazz, a blues is 1-7 for a measure, 4-7 for a measure, 1-7 for a measure, then crammed into one measure, a 2-5 to the key of the 4 for a measure, that's bar 5, bar 6, sharp 4 diminished, fully diminished, right? And then back to 1 dominant for a measure, and then 6 for a dominant, 6 dominant for a measure, or you can cram into one measure a minor 2-5 in the key of the 2, in this case C minor. Now we're at the last 4-bar phrase. C minor 4, which is the 2, excuse me, C minor for 1 bar, the 2 for 1 bar, 5-7 for a bar, and then crammed into the last 2 bars, a turnaround, a 1, 6 dominant, 2 minor, 5-7, and then 1, we're back to the top. Okay, so let's look at this in the first inversion. So I'm going to start with just my garden variety B-flat dominant, the 1 dominant built from the 3rd, right? So how do I build a dominant 7th chord from the 3rd with no alterations? Very simple. It's just half diminished from the major 3rd. So there's my D, D half diminished, right? Built from the major 3rd over B flat. That gets me B flat dominant, okay? Now I'm going to go to my 4 chord. So my 4 chord, I'm going to go to, remember for dominant, just like in a 2-5-1, right? 2-5. In a 2-5-1, for the dominant, we do the Lydian grip from the flat 7. Right, so for G7, in part of a 2-5-1 in C major, 2-5-1 in C major, 2-5, my 5 dominant, my G7, I'm building G7 by doing the Lydian grip from the flat 7, right? So a major 7 with a flatted 5th, which I call the Lydian grip from the flat 7. So we're going to do that for our 4 chord, right? Because that's the smoothest one to jump to from this 1. So if this is my B flat 7, my 1, I'm really close to the Lydian grip from the 4 chord. See how smooth that is? So 1 dominant, I'm doing half diminished from the natural 3. So D half diminished on top of B flat. For the 4 chord, Lydian grip from the flat 7. So D flat Lydian grip from the E flat. Now I'm back to the 1 chord for bar 3. Okay. Now we all know our 2-5s by now. Now I'm going to do a 2-5 in the key of E flat major. So obviously I'm closer to inversion number 2. I'm closer to the second inversion right here, right? Right? So if I'm on that B flat 7, I'm not going to jump all the way up here. Unless I invert in the middle of the bar. So on the B flat 7, I could go B flat 7 and jump to the B flat Lydian grip from the flat 7. Now I can do this 2-5 to E flat 7. But if I'm going to stay in my original version, in the original inversion, when I go to the F, I'm really close to second inversion. So 2-5-1 in E flat major, 2-5, except I've got to land on E flat dominant, right? Because it's a 4 dominant. So I'm just going to go straight back to that Lydian grip from the flat 7. And then I've got to do a sharp 4 diminished. So it's just fully diminished 7. So to keep it simple, in this first version, I'm just going to do straight diminished. Here we go. And because the diminished is symmetric, you can really play it anywhere. So if you want, you can jump up to the E, because we were on this, right? Or you can even just leave your thumb there and just turn this into a diminished here. And then we're going to go back to the 1. And then we're going to do 6 dominant. So here, I can't jump down. Right? That's way too low for me to do that. So I have to jump up either to the inversion of the leading grip here, right? This is the inversion of the leading grip. Or I could do half diminished from the flat 7. Either one of those. And then I would go to my 2, 5, 1 in B flat. 2, 5, and then there we go. And then repeat that. Okay. So if I want to do this whole thing a little bit hipper, I can do leading grip for both the 1 chord and the 4 chord. So how do I change this to a leading grip? Well, we do leading grip from the flat 7, right? So A flat, leading grip. And I'm just going to drop the D and the G down an octave. So it's only 1 note difference, right? We started out with just stacked thirds, right? We did D half diminished over B flat. But we can also just move our pointer finger off of that boring F, that boring old 5th, and let's make it a 13. Make it a little more colorful. So now let's look at the whole blues in this inversion. So I've got leading grip from the flat 7, but inverted, right? Leading grip, and then all I have to do is move these guys down here. And I'm doing leading grip from the flat 7 from E flat. Back to this leading grip. Now I'm really close to my, right, 2, 5 in E flat. 2, 5, back to my leading grip for the E flat dominant. Okay, now I'm just going to go to fully diminished here. And then back to the 1, leading grip. Now here I can go to either the inversion of this leading grip, or I can do half diminished from the flat 7. They both work. And then I'm close to my C minor 2, F7, right? And then just repeat that pattern, but twice as fast for the turnaround. Okay, so let's look at this with some rhythm now. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So you notice less is more. I do hit some downbeats, but I'm doing also lots of and of 1, lots of ands of 2s, and it's up to you. You can either keep both hands together, so you could go like this, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can do almost like a little bit of a call and response with your left hand and your right hand, like this. 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I accidentally hit leading grip on the. So I'm doing a little bit of call and response with my left and my left and my right hand in that video, or in that version rather. It's up to you. So the other thing I did in one of those inversions, which sounds a little bit muddy because my piano's out of tune, is on the E diminished. Right, right? Instead of doing this, I did diminished major 7. That also works, but it sounds better if you do it a little higher. And again, because diminished is symmetric, right? You can go to your fully diminished, right? There's my E fully diminished. And the cool thing is you can do fully diminished from any one of these notes as a voicing, right? Because this is the same thing as this, which is the same thing as this, which is the same thing as this, which is the same thing as this. And now we're back to where we started, right? So you can do any inversion of your fully diminished 7 for the diminished, and you can do any version of your diminished major 7. They would all work because they all come from the same, what we call a parent scale, which if you take jazz theory, you'll know what I'm talking about. So all you need to know is both fully diminished 7 and diminished major 7 will work as a voicing for the E diminished. So these are all the diminished major 7s. Right? Okay. Now let's look at it in a different inversion. So instead of starting with the Lydian grip inverted, or starting with just garden variety, in either case we're building from the 3 for the 1 chord. Let's start our blues with the Lydian grip from the flat 7. Here we go. So now it's the same idea, but everything's backwards. So now instead of the 1 being inverted and the 4 being what I'm going to call root position Lydian grip, it's just going to be inverted, right? So the 1, I'm doing my Lydian grip in root position from the flat 7. Now for the 4, my Lydian grip is inverted, right? This is just this, but down here with these 2 notes inverted, right? Okay, so there we go. So there's 1 Lydian grip from the flat 7, 4 dominant Lydian grip from the flat 7 inverted, back to the 1 dominant. Now I'm really close to my first inversion, 2, 5 in E flat, right? So there's my 2, 5, and then I'm going to go to my inversion of the Lydian grip, or if I really want to, I can just do a 5 instead of a 6 or a 13. It doesn't matter, they both work. Okay? So now I've got to go to my diminished. So once again, I can do fully diminished and leave my hand here, or I can do diminished major 7. So that's the nice thing. I can leave my hand in the same position that it was just in, right? Because here's my E flat 7, right? So either this or this. And then here's my E diminished, either this or this. And then back to my 1 dominant, building Lydian grip from the flat 7. Now to go to the 6 dominant, I can either go to the Lydian grip from the major 3rd here, or I can do the inversion of that, right? So back to my 1, I can do the inversion of the Lydian grip, and then go to my lower 2, 5, 1, like we did in the first version, 6, 2, 5, 1, or backing up, I can go 1, 6, and now I'm closer to second inversion of the 2, 5 in B flat. 2, 5, 1, 6, 2, 5, top. Okay? So now let's look at this inversion in time. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Sorry, I hit the wrong bass note. It's difficult to watch the the screen and play at the same time. I'm actually looking at the screen, not the keyboard. 1, 2, top, go. Okay, and as you noticed, just out of habit, I'm actually kind of changing my voicing sometimes in the middle of a chord. You can always do that, right? So if I'm here, right, I can jump down if I wanted to. I could go in the middle of the bar, right? So I could go 1, 2, 3, 4. right? So I started out in this inversion and I switched to this one, and then here. Or vice versa. If I start here and I decide that's a little bit too low, I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. Right? So I just jumped up in the middle of the chord, right? Some other little things I did that are a little sneaky is maybe after I get to the 4 chord, so 1, 4, 1, 2, 5 to 4. I might do this. I might go 4 and then go from the Lydian grip to this. So my hand is already in a really good position for the diminished. And you saw I did both in the same measure for the diminished. I did the fully diminished and diminished major 7. Right? Just to make the voicing move a little bit more. So starting in bar 4, I did this. I think 1, 2, 3, 4. So see how I managed to throw in 2 voicings in each measure. In the 4 chord, bar 5, I went Bar 6, I went and then back to the 1. And then here, I did that, I think. If I didn't, I could have gone. So what am I doing there? I'm doing Lydian grip, right? And then just moving my pinky down, which is the inversion of this voicing. So I'm combining this voicing and this voicing. So sharp 9, flat 9. Sounds great. Right? Sorry, the music stand is interfering with my shoulder getting to these higher notes. So, one more time, this inversion, and I'll have even more fun with just changing up the voicings just a tiny bit to create a little bit of variety. 1, 2, 3, 4. There you noticed in the turnaround I transitioned to the second inversion as well. So that's the cool thing about going from the 1 to the 6, right? You can go from the 1 up to the 6 or from the 1 down to the 6. So whenever you're going from the 1 to the 6, that's a good time to transition between if you want to do the higher version of the voicings, right, which would be this, or transition to the lower version of the voicings, which would be this. So that's a crash course in playing B-flat blues using mostly Lydian grips. We'll cap this video there, and I'll create another video in which I address walking bass lines for the blues.